this computer. And before I start, I said to some of you before we got started, we're going to have our Christmas party December 11th, which is a Sunday, early evening, 5 or 6, and it's going to be a potluck. For those of you out of town, try to make arrangements to be in town because it is a fun time.
It's always a good evening.
And that is motivating my husband to get our house finished.
Promises.
The past years, we've had it on the big patio looking out over the water. And this year, you're going to have it in the old cinder block house, and we're going to be fine. But
And
I
it's
hope
going to be fun.
we would love to see all of you there.
December 11th.
It's December 11th. We always do it on a Sunday afternoon. That's why I asked you when you were going the other day, Luis, I asked you when you were going to go to Mexico. So I know it's before you go to Mexico. Review. So as we know, Solomon's 59 years old when he dies. So he's in his late 50s when he writes this. And he had written parts of the Bible before that showed his belief in God, and he believes in God, but God is not an active role in his life is the best way, or he's not seeking God. He is seeking wisdom under the sun. We're going to look at chapters 8, 9, and 10 today. And Gina, I thought of you this morning, the question of who this is written to, and we don't know the answer to it, but these 3 chapters are very different in what they're talking about, 8, 9, and 10. And to me, it's speculation, but it lends itself to thinking it's a journal.
I think what's important, and it's probably starting today, is that we spend some time, instead of looking at Solomon and his depression, about how we can not get there or how we can get away from it. And we have some really good examples and instructions in our scriptures. I just don't want to get so bogged down in this guy's depression that we start feeling that way.
So chapter 8 is basically obey the king. So we're going to go through that one pretty briefly. Chapter 9, we'll spend the most of the time on that. Chapter 9, it is Solomon pointing out 3 different facts that are facts, but coming to conclusions that is a result of how he's lost his way. And then chapter 10 goes back to these sort of proverbs, and they're, instead of proverbs of wise people, they're proverbs of foolish people. And there is a lot of truisms in chapter 10, but other than that, there's not a lot to gain from it. So we'll spend the bulk of our time in chapter 9. Chapter 8, who is like the wise man? Who knows the interpretation of a matter? A man's wisdom brightens his face, and the sternness of his face is change. Keep the king's command. I say, because of your oath before God, do not hasten to leave his presence, and do not persist in a bad cause, for he will do whatever he pleases. For the king's word is supreme, and who can say to him, what are you doing? Whoever keeps his command will come to no harm, and a wise heart knows the right time and procedure. For there's a right time and procedure to every purpose, though a man's misery weighs heavily upon him. Since no one knows what will happen, who can tell him what is to come? As no man has power over the wind to contain it, so no one has authority over the day of his day of death. As no one can be discharged in wartime, so wickedness will not release those who practice it. All this I have seen, applying my mind to every deed that is done under the sun. There is a time when one man lords it over another to his own detriment.
We said we were going to be quick on this, but keep the king's command. I happen to be the king. And he says, who knows enough to tell the king, what are you doing? And that's a temptation for us to question the people in charge. And what Solomon is saying, I'm the king. You're not good. And he said that, at one point in here, he says, there's a time and a place for everything in a proper procedure. So if you are going to try and give me advice, wait till we're in private, wait till I'm in a good mood, because I'm the king. I don't think there's a lot more that has to be said about this thing, except that, it's probably good advice for us to recognize that there are people who have more power than us. And it's unlikely that us telling them what to do is going to help. Solomon does say, none of you know what's going to happen tomorrow. None of you can tell me, oh, look, I know this is what's going to happen, so you need to follow my advice. You don't know. It's my job. Let me do it.
Then too, I saw the burial of the wicked who used to go in and out of the holy place, and they were praised in the city where they had done so. This too is futile. When the sentence for a crime is not speedily executed, the hearts of men become fully set on doing well. Although a sinner does evil 100 times and still lives long, yet I also know that it'll go well with those who fear God, who are reverent in his presence. Yet because the wicked do not fear God, it will not go well with them, and their days will not lengthen like a shadow.
And I don't know about the rest of you, but we have seen examples of people who were not very nice people, to say the least. I mean, if you know what goes on behind the curtain, but they donate a lot of money. And so when it's their funeral, they have all the people turn out and praise them. And what he's saying is true, but I just don't know that there's a lot of profit in dwelling on it. It's the way of the world. People get their names on plaques when they donate the money to build a wing for the hospital, and a lot of them are not necessarily the nicest of people. Yes, I got an amen. And we tend to look at that and go, yeah, I say we, but I do. And I say, would you look at that? They're acting like these people raised the dead, and they were just not very nice. True, it's a true statement. Get used to it. We'll talk more about that.
And this is, he does mention God here, but notice he mentions God as, if you're good, he's not going to lengthen your days. He believes in God, but he doesn't. There's no eternity here. There's no. It is you die and it's over, and it's how long this life is and how good this life is. But so he believes in God. The problem he's having is about eternity, right?
Yeah, and this is one of the things we talked about this week, is we've got to get to the point that we start talking about the fact that Solomon is misguided. Solomon has lost his way, and he has gotten to the point that it's all about this life. It's all about, what do I get? How long do I live? And we have the benefit of being able to look at scriptures that say things like, I'm the resurrection and the life. He says to the thief on the cross, today you'll be with me, this day you'll be with me in paradise. Now we get spoken to about the fact that this life is not the end. Paul says, for me to live in Christ and to die is gain. He says, if I live, then it's more fruit for my work. And if I die, I get to go be with him. And that's even better. Solomon has none of this. Solomon has focused so much on this life here and now, how much stuff can, the old thing that says, he who dies with the most toys wins. And yet he says that the moment you die, you don't know anything anymore. You don't even know you won. Whoever that is, and it may well have been him. But if in his way of looking at this, where he has gotten to, he won't even be aware that he won the game. So he's just twisted. He's just gotten to that point. And a lot of it is from only looking at this, like when you die, when you close your eyes, that's all there is.
Now, this is God with a capital G.
It is. You have the Bible that you have does. It's always the word El,
Okay.
or Elohim.
So it is a higher being. It's not a person.
And that can be God. That can be the God of Abraham and Isaac, and it can be. My point is, though, what we were saying last week is he's sort of disconnected. He's depersonalized this. And it's just one of the clues to where Solomon is and how he got here.
Verse 14, there's a futility that is done on earth. There are righteous men who get what the actions of the wicked deserve, and there are wicked men who get what the actions of the righteous deserve. I say that this too is futile. So I commended the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a man under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry. For this joy will accompany him in his labor during the days of his life that God gives him under the sun. When I applied my mind to know wisdom and to observe the task that one performs on earth, though his eyes do not see sleep in the day or even in the night, I saw every work of God, and that a man is unable to comprehend the work that is done under the sun. Despite his efforts to search it out, he cannot find its means. Even if the wise man claims to know, he is unable to comprehend. That's the dust in the wind song. What is the
If I
verse?
claim to be a wise man, it surely means that I don't know. That guy wrote essentially Solomon's words without ever having read them. I mean, it is an amazing story, but
So if you want to go back and listen to Dust in the Wind, listen to the lyrics and you'll think, oh my gosh, Solomon wrote this, but we listened to an interview of this gentleman. What's his name?
Kerry Livgren.
Kerry Lifgren, and he was in a dark place and seeking God, and he hadn't read Solomon before. He hadn't read Ecclesiastes before writing that, but it's a direct quote almost. But anyhow, now chapter 9, and we're going to do it in 3 sections. I'll read the first section of chapter 9. So I took all this to heart and concluded that the righteous and the wise, as well as their deeds, are in God's hands. Man does not know what lies ahead, whether love or hate. It's the same for all. There's a common fate for the righteous and the wicked, for the good and the bad, for the clean and the unclean, for the one who sacrifices and the one who does not. As it is for the good, so it is for the sinner. As it is for the one who makes a vow, so it is for the one who refuses to take a vow. This is an evil in everything that is done under the sun. There is one fate for everyone. Furthermore, the hearts of men are full of evil and madness while they are alive, and afterwards they join the dead. There is hope, however, for anyone who is among the living, for even a live dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward because the memory of them is forgotten. Their love, their hate, and their envy have already vanished, and they will never again have a share in all that is done under the sun.
So work backwards on this. Solomon, maybe at some level, he believes that there is life after we die, that there is more that goes on. And I think a lot of people do, but what Solomon acts like is this is the only one that matters. I'm only concerned with what happens here, what happens now, and what I get and don't get. And you look at him on the one hand, say that it's not fair. People get more, some people get more than they deserve. And yet he says the very next section, only one thing happens to everybody. It's all equal. We all die and we all give everything up. This is a terrible way to be. And we really have to talk more about that. But I want you to look at verse 4. There's hope, however, for anyone who's among the living, for even a live dog is better than a dead lion. Now, when I first read this, I read it wrong. I read it backwards. And I don't know if reading it backwards affected the way I think, or if I read it backwards because of who I am. But I read this, it's better, I'd rather be a dead lion than a live dog. If I've got to go through my life, slinking away like a dog, I'm as good as dead already. I would rather, and so my thought was, I'm going to stand up, and sooner or later, a bigger lion will get me, and that's okay. I'm not going to live like a whipped dog. And I lived my life like this.
And then he reread it.
It wasn't until just a very few years ago, I happened to go back and I said, hey, wait a minute. And I still think Solomon is wrong. I still think it's better to be a dead lion than a live dog. I'd rather have been a lion than to have extended, my life a little bit by slinking away like a dog. But that's what Solomon is saying is, at least the living have something going for them. It's better to be, even if you're just, some pathetic dog, at least you're alive, which is, once again, you see the inconsistency. And what I want to point you to is how inconsistent this way of thinking is. That should tip you off there's something wrong with it. Because at one point he says the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth, and a stillborn baby is better than all of them. And yet here he's saying it's better to be a live dog and slink. I mean, at least you're alive. At least you got that going for you. This is a broken way of thinking. And the big thing that he says, though, the biggest thing is this idea that once you close your eyes the last time, once they put you in the ground, that's it, it's over. That thinking leads you to a lot of this place where he's at.
And so
There's no hope.
we listened to what I thought a really good sermon, and we listened to it a couple of times on this chapter. And the idea, and one of the reasons I liked it versus you hear us talk about Pastor Paul, we listen to him a lot. Pastor Paul believes the book of Ecclesiastes is for non-believers. And I'm thinking, I think it's for believers. This guy said, look at this. If you ask someone who believes in God, do you believe in heaven? Do you believe in eternity? They say yes. Okay. I mean, that's just sort of a belief. If you do believe in God, you more than likely believe in heaven. Okay, so you believe in heaven. But he was challenging us, do we live that way? Do we live that we believe that there is something after this? And we say we do, but the world's wisdom is you better take all you've got right now. We've only got, so many years, so we better go for the gusto and do everything. And he went down, he gave some good examples.
Well, one of them is this: what we're told, and we have the benefit of the Messiah comes and gives us some further instruction. I feel sorry for Solomon in a lot of ways. It's got to have been harder then, but this idea we're told, we like to talk about. When we read the New Testament, we get forgiven, but we're not forgiven. We're told we were bought with a price, and a great and terrible price. He says you don't belong to yourself anymore. You live, and Paul talks a lot about to live for Christ, to have a purpose. And Solomon clearly feels like he doesn't have any purpose other than just to squeeze a few more years out. And yeah, there are a whole bunch of examples of it. But the point is this idea that grab all you can, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, right? There's more to it than that. And I can't see how you could feel any other way than Solomon does if you lose sight of the fact that this isn't about piling up the most toys to see if we can win at the end.
But I guess I want to add that I don't think it's unusual for believers to think, you better go for the gusto.
We live in this place, and it's easy to get caught up thinking that way. Gene and I talked outside this morning. I can tell you, there was a time I was where Solomon is. Absolutely, I was that guy. I was there, and everything I read that he said just sort of affirmed what I was already thinking. It's not fair. It's not, all this, the stuff he's saying just sang to me like a siren song, and it's broken. And we see all these other places, our instruction, our education, that what Solomon is saying is a thing that it's easy, pardon me, it's easy to go there, but it's just not true.
So,
Gene?
go.
I don't,
Oh, no.
this is very difficult for me.
No? Can you hear?
Well, thank you, Virginia. You
Yeah.
guys have been suffering in silence. It was the other way.
Okay.
That's the mute.
Oh, okay.
Technology sits hard and heavy on my wife. She's a genius in certain things, but not in technology. So what Gene was saying was, I don't see how Solomon can feel this way after all he said. He's, third generation, and he's the king, and he's seen them delivered, and David was, delivered. How can Solomon feel this way? And Gene, I can tell you from personal experience, I can tell you from observation, I've seen a lot of people who are absolute believers get in this same place. But I can tell you about me. I'm always willing to open up a vein and bleed for you. When I tell you that I was this guy, I can just as easily say, I don't see how someone could have observed me and say, I don't see how he can feel this way. I don't see how he can think this way after all I've received. How can I possibly get to this place? And yet I did. And it comes, largely, how can I put this? And I told you this morning, people go to Vegas and play roulette, right? Or the slots, and they see somebody else win a whole bunch of money, and all they do is dump money in, and they say it's not fair. I mean, it's just not fair. They win, I always win, I never win, it's all bad. And what I explained this morning is roulette is the most fair thing in the world. The people who own the casinos, if enough people play, they know exactly how much they'll take in. They know exactly how much they'll pay out. They know exactly, it's math. It's super fair. Now, if you want to say that for some individuals win and some individuals lose, the only way to make that fair would be if you put a quarter in and it slides right through and comes back to you. That's fair. Everybody gets out what they put in. And we actually reach a point, we don't even want to put anything in to this life. We just want to get back and get back and get back. And what I'm telling you is Solomon felt this way for the same reason a bunch of us feel this way. I can't speak to anyone else but myself, but we start looking to our own wisdom. We start looking to, what do I have in my pockets? What kind of car do I have? And it's never enough. It's never, ever enough. And what Solomon shows us is exactly that. I've talked about people, and I myself, that say, if I just had this, I could, if I had more money, I could go buy this, and then I'd be happy. And my observation says, by and large, no one's happy for very long for having bought something. And we get our eyes in the wrong place and we start saying, how much more stuff can I get in this life? So how can Solomon feel this way? Gene, he feels this way because he's human. He feels this way, and it's easy to say, yeah, but look at how much he had. Every person here, I can point you just a few blocks over to people who would look at what you have and say, oh my gosh, you're rich. It is never about the stuff. And this is part of the point for today, is that's what Solomon has done. Solomon will never be satisfied. He can feel the way he does because he's human. Because if we don't look to God, if we don't understand, and I'm struggling here, that what was it Einstein said, if you don't know something well enough to explain it, you don't know it well enough. But I look at this, I told you at one point I was this guy, but I came to realize that I have gotten so much more than I deserve. There will never be a time when I can look and say, you know what, I deserve more than that, more than what I have. What I deserve, I've told you, I've done lousy things in this life. Nobody in Vegas hits the jackpot and says, you know what, life is not fair. It's not fair that I win and somebody else doesn't. Those people never complain that life isn't fair. Nobody ever says, you know, I just hit the jackpot here. Let me just distribute this to all the other people who've lost money. It's about this idea of me. I don't feel like I have enough. That's how Solomon got there. And I can vouch for him because I'm that guy.
We can read it as Solomon's prayer.
Okay.
I have been to the last inning and I'm still empty. Help me. What I see is vanities. But now, unless you're God himself, that I can never be, I'm never going to be happy. I'm not even going to look for tomorrow in the spiritual world anywhere. So I hear a prayer, a guy desperate. I've run sort of the opposite of Paul. I've run the good race. I'm sorry, it's not enough for Solomon. You got to go, you got to put it in. And the only way you get there is to be God yourself, and then you're happy. And this guy got as close to the God himself concept with the king and all his riches, and it's not enough.
Jesus talks about a life more abundant. We're going to move on with this because there's more stuff, but he talks about a life more abundant. And what Solomon is seeing is the exact opposite of that. And so what we just sort of have to accept is there is a life more abundant. Maybe there's another way I can put this. Any of you golf, any of you play golf, you go out on the golf course, and if you start thinking about all the things that you're doing wrong, you're gonna shank it. You're gonna hit something horrible. You think about you have to have a positive swing image, right? This life more abundant, instead of looking at all this other stuff, maybe it's a matter of saying, Jesus tells us there is a life more abundant. This guy is missing it. What's the disconnect? Let's go on. We'll get to some of these.
Okay, well, and this first section was basically on you live, and when life's over, you close your eyes and you're dead. And to me, for believers, it seems like the easiest thing. We'd all say there's a heaven after this, but how does it really play out when a loved one of ours is facing death? Do we, you know, what is that fine line with saying we know that we say out loud they have a better life, there's eternity, but do we feel it?
There's a saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
Yeah, that's a good one. So that's the first section. Second section. So after he decides we're all going to die, so what is this in conclusion? Verse 7. Go, eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works. Let your garments always be white and never spare the oil for your head.
Hold on, stop right there.
Okay.
Here's another problem, Gene. I want you to see this. Eat, drink, and be merry. And he says, you know, you just go, he says, let your garments always be white and never spare the oil for your head. We have an acquaintance who was talking about Rockport and saying, well, Rockport's going to die because now everybody goes to their ranches on the weekend.
This was several years ago.
Yeah, several years ago. But you see the arrogance of that everybody owns a ranch and they're going to their big ranches and not going down to Rockport on the weekend. Look at the arrogance of this. Let your garments always be white and never spare the oil for your head. I promise you, there were a lot of people in Solomon's kingdom who didn't have any oil for their head. And he's saying, use it all the time, splash it on, several times a day. Let your garments be white. They worked in the fields. Their garments were never white. This is a guy who's got so much. I did a consulting gig out in the East Coast. And the president CEO of that company used to get really offended. He got worked up. He couldn't understand how these men working for the company, it was a steel company and they were all men out in the shop, but these men couldn't support a family on $18,000 a year.
This is a while ago.
It's been a while, but what's wrong with them? How could you not? His wife would go on shopping trips and spend more than that in a single shopping trip of what he expects these people to support their entire family for a whole year on. And he was incensed. He was angry at these guys who had the nerve to say, please, sir, can I have some more? I really have to feed these mouths that live in my house. And there's your other clue. How did Solomon get there? Here's another clue he's left for us. Never always let your garments be white and never spare the oil for your head. He's got so much, he is so disconnected that he thinks he's entitled to always have white garments and always have oil for his head. That's how you get here, is not at least being aware of the fact that you've gotten more than you deserve. These other people who have less, it's not always because they don't deserve it and they don't live this is a mindset. This is a way of understanding the world. And what I was trying to say a while ago, part of what got me away from this was realizing that it's more than fair. I get way more than I deserve on a daily basis. And if you don't believe me, start looking at your life and try it, and then look around you as you drive through town and you realize if it's not fair, if this life is not fair, I'm the beneficiary of it. I'm not the victim of it.
Enjoy life with your beloved wife all the days of the fleeting life that God has given you under the sun, all your fleeting days. For this is your portion in life and in your labor under the sun. Whatever you find to do with your hands, do it with all your might. For in Sheol, where you are going, there is no work or planning or knowledge or wisdom. You want to explain that?
It basically is just the place of the dead. Any longer discussion is just confusing. Okay. He's just saying, when you die, when you close your eyes, there's nothing. So enjoy what you got now while you got it.
I saw something else under the sun. The race is not for the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither is the bread to the wise, nor the wealth to the intelligent, nor the favor to the skillful. For sometimes chance happened to all. For surely no man knows this time, like a fish caught in a cruel net or a bird trapped in a snare. So men are ensnared in an evil time that suddenly falls upon them.
The race is not to the swift. The battle is not to the strong. Once again, it's not fair. Gene, you're an attorney. Have you ever gone up against an attorney who was utterly incompetent? Oh, say yes. You know the truth. I have a friend growing up who, he was a strange kid to begin with, but on his birthday, his brother gave him some money. He bought a fan, We didn't know why. He bought a little fan, and he liked to whittle. He liked to carve. And so one day my mother went over, and his name was Bill. She said he's whittling, and it's blowing sawdust chips in his eyes. And she said, you know, Bill, if you put the fan behind you, it'll blow that away from you, and you won't get it in your eyes anymore. And Bill was just amazed that someone, like, she was a genius. All right. Bill became a doctor. And that should frighten every single one of you, because there has to be out there last in his class in med school. They're out there. So Bill wins a contest for the German club, and he wins a free trip to Germany. And when he came back, they interviewed him and they asked him what did he learn or what surprised him the most. And he said he was surprised that all of them spoke German. Bill is a doctor. Right now, the race is not to the swift, nor is medical school at times. I don't know how it happens, but Solomon is seeing this, and he's going, you know, the people who get out there and work hard, somebody made a fortune selling pet rocks. That's not right. And yet they've got a fortune, and me, who has wonderful ideas, did not make a fortune. That's the way we think. So what Solomon is saying about the race is not to the swift. He says, I look around, and here it's always the same old thing. I told you it's monotonous. We don't seem to get what we deserve.
I have also seen the wisdom under the sun, and it was great to me. There was a small city with few men. A mighty king came against it, surrounded it, and built large siege ramps against it. Now a poor wise man was found in the city, and he saved the city by his wisdom. Yet no one remembered that poor man. And I said, wisdom is better than strength, but the wisdom of the poor man is despised, and his words are not heeded. The calm words of the wise are heeded over the shouts of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good.
So this story about the poor wise man who saves the city. And then after it's over with, they forget about him. Probably somebody else took credit for it, right? That happens a whole lot. And he sees that, and he says, I've seen this, and it was left a real impression on me. It was a big deal to me. That's what he says. And this poor wise man comes up with a plan that saves the city. But if you remember just a few paragraphs ago, he was telling people, don't correct the king. Don't tell me what to do. Don't share your wisdom with me. It's my job. You don't know what's going to happen. Remember that? We just got through reading it. And yet here he is bemoaning the fact about this poor wise man who saved the city, and nobody listened. And he says that the wisdom of the poor is despised. And he's right. I mean, there are people out there that are, you know, pretty wise people. I know a lot of them, and nobody's going to give them. But what is Solomon doing here? Once again, you look at this, and all I can tell you is, instead of paying so much attention to Solomon, I look at this and say, man, the arrogance of that guy. And then I realize, oh, wait a minute, I do that. I do that. This is a recipe for how you get where Solomon is. And you see somebody do something, you know, yap their mouth at somebody and be hurtful with their words. And I get upset at it. You know, how could somebody do that to another person? And then you remember, you go, oh yeah, I did that before. I mean, I did that yesterday in a different, you know, because I felt like I was justified. And so here's Solomon. If you look at this too deeply, what you have to come home to is that Solomon thinks he's above all this. So the idea of this poor wise man, Solomon would not have listened to this poor wise man. Solomon just told us, don't do that. Don't bother coming to me with your advice.
Before we go on to 10, I want to bring up one more thing in 9, and that was this concept. You know, the first thing is, you know, we believe that there's eternity and there's heaven and there's more to this world there's more to life than just this world. The second part is that we're not supposed to live just for ourselves, just to make ourselves happy. And the concept we hear, especially when somebody does sermons on this one, is that you're supposed to be living for God.
Living for Christ is what Paul does, yeah.
Living for Christ. And to me, that is a harder concept. What does that mean? If I asked a Christian, do you believe in heaven? They'd say yes. If you ask most people, and I challenged Scott this morning to say, so what's your purpose in life? Very few believers, I believe, would just say right out of their mouth, my purpose is to live for Christ, because I don't even know what that means. So, my purpose is to provide for my family. Even if you're not my purpose is happiness. Okay, as a Christian, we're probably not supposed to say self-happiness. We get that. But do we say my purpose is to provide for my family? My purpose is to be a good spouse, to be a good friend, to do good. But what Jesus says is our purpose in life is to live for Christ. And that part, we don't get.
Well, it's a little hard. I talked before in some of the other lessons about love, that Jesus came and said love. And it's easy to get caught up in that and make it like the Beatles song, all you need is love, da, 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 da. Well, what does that mean? And one of the guys we listened to this week said exactly that. What does that even mean? It's like I always gripe about, if you watch commercials on TV, local car dealers are the best. What makes us different? Service. Service makes us say, well, what do you even mean by that? I was in there, I took my car in there, and it's a word. And as long as it's just a word, it doesn't count for very much. This idea of love, one of the guys we listened to talked about, I take money away from you and give it to this other person who's in need. And I say, look how much I love that person. And you say, wait a minute, you took my money. Yeah, no. Look at how much I love. And we twist this idea of love up so much that it gets to be like service. What does it really mean? One of the things, and this is me, it's not here, but I'm sort of convinced that Christianity is practiced one-on-one. And that I'm not sure there's, this idea of pray for the whole world. I get that, but remember, Jesus came and didn't straighten all this out.
He didn't straighten out the world.
They killed him, right? He says, and we're told several times, and we're told in Revelation, he says, I'm coming back. And when I do, there'll be no more tears. He'll dry every tear. Things will change. But we have opportunities one-on-one. We have opportunities to tell people, you know what? I got more than I deserve. I was bought with a price. And to share that knowledge and to have people maybe realize that what goes on here is not the end. We have those opportunities. But I don't think it's that love is about go save the world. You have an individual that's presented to you often. And there's the thing also that I think Solomon is missing, is he's looking from the 10,000-foot view and not able to see how many people in his own kingdom, I guarantee you, don't have oil for their head. Pick one. That's part of the service. And it changes, by the way, it changes this outlook. It does.
Chapter 10. So we're going to do these, and we've got about 10 minutes. I'm going to let you explain them. So these are Proverbs of the foolish, and lots of truths here as I go. Verse 1, as dead flies bring a stench to the perfumer's oil, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart inclines to the right, but the heart of a fool to the left. So
this is one of those, and I don't necessarily think these are foolish. There's actually not much that I disagree with in 10. He's on base, The idea that dead flies, if you're making perfume, probably are not good for the perfume. I get it. And so, a few foolish people can ruin a lot of good work.
Like I
Okay.
said, a lot of truths here.
But a wise man's heart inclines to the right and a fool's heart inclines to the left. All of you familiar with the word dexterity, dexterous, right? The origin of that word is actually right-handed, clockwise. Everything from the right is dexter. The opposite of that, everything to the left, sinister. That's the origin of the word. The idea of sinister being to the left. And if you think about it, there was a point where they actually thought left-handed people were evil. They're like, servants of Satan kind of thing. That's all he's talking about. But he's saying that the wise person is inclined towards God. The foolish person is inclined away from God.
Even as a fool walks along the road, his sense is lacking, and he shows everyone that he is a fool. If a ruler's temper flares against you, do not abandon your post, for calmness lays great offenses to rest.
Quickly, there are people who can't take any correction. In the workplace, most of us have seen someone who was corrected by the boss and said, I quit, I'm going, I'm out of here. And all Solomon is saying, if the ruler's, wrath, if they correct you and they're not nice about it, don't abandon your post, stay calm, speak calmly. These are good instructions. There's nothing wrong with that.
There's an evil I have seen under the sun, an error that proceeds from the ruler. Folly is appointed to great heights, but rich sit in lowly positions. I have seen slaves on horseback, while princes go on foot like slaves.
We heard this week, and every single person who looked at it overlooked one real important thing. There's an evil I've seen under the sun. And then he says, an error that proceeds from the ruler.
Stop right there. That's loaded.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's an error but what he's talking about is rulers. What I've seen is that rulers promote people who are fools and let these wise, helpful people stay in lowly places. If you've ever worked in corporate America, Julie, oh, your face is not on there. I would have loved to see your face. If you've ever worked in corporate America, the idea that you get some people promoted that probably shouldn't be. There's the smile, Julie. You've been in corporate, you know what I'm talking about. And he's saying, and he says the same thing. I have seen slaves, I've seen foolish servants up on horseback. Meanwhile, princes go on foot like servants, like slaves. And it's all the same thing. That's a bad ruler that doesn't. And so they promote people who flatter them. They promote people who think like them. And they once again, 10 is full of a bunch of stuff that is true. I don't have a problem with it.
He who digs a pit may fall into it, and he who breaches a wall may be bitten by a snake. The one who quarries stone may be injured by them, and he who splits logs endangers himself. If the axe is dull and the blade unsharpened, more strength must be exerted, but skill produces success. If the snake bites before it is charmed, there is no profit for the charmer.
These are proverbs. This is all about don't be foolish. Okay. This thing about whoever chops wood, go to YouTube and do a search on tree cutting failures. There are more of them. You won't get to them all in one day. The people do the dumbest things while cutting trees and cutting limbs off. I got up on a ladder, I was being smart, read all the stuff, and I cut it, and this big limb comes down, hits on its end, bends, and springs right into me and the ladder that I'm on. People do dumb things. He does mention, though, that the dull axe takes a lot more work. What he's talking about is be smart enough, do your homework, sharpen the axe, otherwise you're a fool. Once again, good proverb.
And the snake charmer?
The snake charmer is they had those people, when you take the lid off that little basket with the cobra inside, the cobra springs up. We've learned it's not the sound, it is the waving of the end of that instrument But what he's saying is that if you're careless and you let the snake out before having the thing ready, you could get bitten by the snake. I don't know this is a proverb, but what does it mean? Don't be a bonehead. Okay, the problem is the people who need this the most are the boneheads. They're not going to hear it, but it's a good proverb. He's absolutely right.
The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of his talk is folly, and the end of his speech is evil madness. Yet the fool multiplies words. No one knows what is coming, and who can tell him what will come after him? Don't talk so much.
Yeah, I don't want to say that. I mean, once again, it's a truism. We all know people who just talk all the time. And I don't know, maybe that's me. I should probably look at that. But he says that the words of a gracious man, or the words out of a wise man's mouth, are gracious. And yet you get these fools who are biting and bitter, and they multiply words. They talk all the time. It seems like they just don't have, and once again, good proverb.
The toil of the fool wearies him, but he does not know the way to the city. Woe to you, O land whose king is youth, and whose princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, O land whose king is a son of nobles, and whose princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness.
The toil of a fool wearies him. He doesn't even know the way to the city. That's ready, fire, aim. Taken off on the journey before you consulted Google Maps. You wind up going a lot further. Well, when you go by foot, you pay a price for not knowing the way to the city, and yet people jump in. That's fools. Good proverb. But this next one: woe to you, O land whose king is a youth, and whose princes feast in the morning. They need to get up. If they're the leaders, they're the princes, they're the ruler of it, they really need to be meeting the day and all of the stuff that needs to be done. And instead he's talking, and it happens once again, they get up in the morning and they start feasting and drinking, and they're sluggish, and they're not going to rule the country very well. Blessed are you, O land whose king is a son of nobles. Now that reveals something about Solomon, that the son of nobles. But try and look at what he's saying. These are people whose princes feast at the proper time, after the work is done. And he says, and they feast for strength and not for drunkenness. Okay, good words to live by,
Work first, party second.
Work first, party second. A good proverb.
Happy hour.
Through laziness, the roofs cave in, and the hands of the idle, the house leaks.
I don't know what more you'd say about that. Don't be lazy.
A feast is prepared for laughter, and wine makes life merry, but money is the answer for everything.
This is not what a lot of people think it is. It sounds like he's saying money is everything, okay? But you notice what he says, that a feast is prepared for laughter and wine makes life merry. But you got to do some work to be able to pay for it. With that, they say that there are a lot of things that money can't buy, but just try buying those things without money. He's saying that there's nothing wrong with a feast. There's nothing wrong with drinking wine and making merry, but you gotta work to make the money to pay for it. There are people who are rulers who don't really have to work, like the ones he was talking. This is sort of a continuation. They get the money handed to them. They feast and drink all the time, and they didn't earn any of it. Good proverb.
Do not curse the king even in your thoughts, or curse the rich even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air may carry your words, and a winged creature may report your speech. I just love this one.
He's not
And
really,
remember, he's the king.
he's not really saying that birds go take your words and talk to somebody. We have an expression. Where did you hear that? Oh, a little bird told me. All right. You in private gripe to one of your friends about your boss, for instance. or their boss. And you think this is a private conversation, and then that person goes and tells somebody, and that person, and so it gets back to the boss. Not a wise thing to do.
But this is also funny because he is the king and he's basically telling somebody, don't talk bad about me because it'll get back to me.
He has told us earlier, if you're the ruler, don't listen too much because you might hear your servants curse you. And you know you've done the same thing. How about this? You're in a restaurant and you're telling a story, a not too nice story about somebody that you both know, not knowing that the person at the next table is their cousin. Happens often enough.
And probably more often in Rockport because it's a small town.
The lesson to this might be, and what Solomon actually says, is probably don't spend so much time telling these stories. A good proverb, you know, he says, do not curse the king, even in your thoughts. Of course, he's the king, but I know someone who had a friend at work that was constantly just griping and bitter. And you get in a habit of starting to swap stories with that person and you start talking about people. It'll come back to bite you, but it's also not good for you. And here at the end is another thing about how to get where Solomon is. If you're looking around and what you notice is the weak points in the people around you, if you don't see them as a child of God, and instead you're constantly telling these stories about, can you believe what this person does? Can you believe that? This sounds like the Wizard of Oz. If you want to be smart, what you need is a diploma. If you want to be brave, what you need is heart, or whatever the thing was. If you want to not be so unhappy, don't spend your time telling nasty stories about the people around you. And all I can tell you is it's true. It actually works. If you spend all your time doing this, you're going to be seeing the side that is not life more abundant all the time. And it becomes a habit and it gets ingrained in who you are. So what Solomon is talking about, I know, I'll wind it up, we're done. But what Solomon is talking about here is, these are good proverbs. This is good advice. And it actually does tie into the kind of a mindset that Solomon is in. They're children of God. And if you don't see in their folly yourself, that's probably part of the problem too. I can tell you I do these things often enough, and I try and catch myself because I wind up here and I go, oh, you know, like I said, hey, wait a minute. I did that yesterday. I did that myself. So some hopefully beginning of some talk about the fact we are not our own. We were bought with a price. Solomon relies on his own wisdom instead of the wisdom he's been given from God. Solomon has lost sight of the fact that the end of this life is not the end. That just like the thief on the cross, today you'll be with me in paradise. And Jesus knows that's after death. So if you really say, I believe, and I think that he really was indeed the Messiah and God incarnate, then when he says something like that, and he says, today, after you die, you'll be with me, that says Solomon has lost sight of one of the most important things, and that is this life is not the end. That's a surefire recipe for this kind of depression.
Ready?
Anything else? Oh, I see. It's 10:04 and I'm in trouble. I did the best I could. And I'm dead serious. She is a genius in a whole lot of stuff. I get around a lot. We would not be here and we would not have these studies without her. God, we try to remember to be thankful that when we're healed, we're the one that comes back and says, thank you. That when we do see your hand on us, when we do see your presence in the world around us, that we remember to say thank you and to recognize that. And I don't know why, I don't know if anyone knows why, but I don't know why we lose sight of that. I don't know why sometimes we get so dark that we don't notice your presence around us. And what I'd ask for today is a reminder to us that you show us in ways that we won't ignore, that we can't ignore, and remind us that you're always there with us. We hopefully all of us, but I feel badly for someone who's in this shape and feeling that depressed. Help us to remember that that's us. On another day, on a bad day, that's us. And instead of looking down on them for being negative, we remember they're also your child, and that we have the opportunity to hopefully bring some of the same comfort that we receive to these other children of yours. Be with this week, be with us this week, and send us out with those reminders and those opportunities. Amen. For those of you that don't have to run right now, can I tell you another quick story? I was a consultant. I was working at DuPont for a while. And in the winter, we had cloud cover about as high as our ceiling. It's like, I mean, it was low and it was dark, it was gray, it was drizzly. It had been that way for days. Sorry. Right. It had been that way for days, and it was depressing. And I'm driving to work and I'm thinking about this. I actually am thinking about this, and I'm going to have to get out of the parking lot and walk in through the drizzle, and it's going to be, you know, overcast all day, and I'm just sick of it. And there was some, I don't know if it's a front of some weather conjunction, but something hit just, you know, within minutes of this. And it looked like these dark clouds hit a wall and just turned. And they went, it was, I've not seen anything like it. And I'm sure there's a natural, you know, but what happened was, as this happened, it was like someone peeled the lid back on a can. All right. The clouds just got ripped back, and behind them was blue sky. And it was beautiful. And I think it was a front. I think it may have gotten a little bit cooler, but the way this worked, like someone peeled the lid back on a can. And I realized that blue sky was there all along, just right on the other side of this thing that's depressing me. It was always there. I couldn't see it, but to lose sight of the fact that the world is not a bad place. God did not make a mistake. He didn't send the, somehow let me be feeling depressed because of this. It's always there. It's a good place. And that was one of those incidents that changed me, because I realized applying that to other places. So often I get in these dark places and I think it's all, you know, and the people are all acting crazy and they're being mean to each other, on and on and on. It's a good place. And I mean, God is present. And this wonderful place he's made for us, even when we're under some clouds, peel it back, it's still a good place. That's what Solomon is missing. Solomon always brings it down to what's wrong, and doesn't see, as Jean pointed out, God has provided for him fabulously, and he does for us. And we just choose sometimes, or we somehow we get caught in a place where we don't see it. We won't see it. It's always there.
Great analogy, Scott.
You guys have a good week. Hi, Sherry, you got on, you feeling okay?
Hey, I'm feeling okay. Thank you, guys.
Good deal. Enjoy that grandbaby.
All right,
June.
will do. Say bye.
Hi, guys. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Anyway.